Yes.
Once.
So, yes, we will start off now. Thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute delight to have you all. Well, this panel has been spoken about a lot because this is going to address the real life scenarios of what it is in the wedding, like the healthy relationships pre and post marriage, the entire bit that you all are going to address about the specialists from the industry. So we are very excited. The moderator for this panel is going to be Dr. Kalyan. So a little about doctor before we start off. So, Dr. Kalyan is one of the top most psychiatrists of the country, and he is one of the founder members of the Richmond Fellowship Asia Pacific Forum and former president of the body. So, he has published several peer reviewed articles both at national and international journals, in addition to contributing chapters in postgraduate textbooks in psychiatry and medicine. A popular teacher, he is frequently invited to give lectures across the country related to psychiatry and mental health. This was just a brief about Doctor. There's a lot more that Doctor has in his portfolio, and he's going to be leading the panel today. Well, I am very much excited for this one. Thank you so much for everyone being here once again. And Doctor, the platform's all yours.
Thank you, Shika. Thank you, Arvind, and thank you, Esposal team. Divya, your mic. You have to switch on. Thank you very much for having us in this program. And we are equally excited because when you're doing a virtual marriage expo, it is a completely brilliant idea to bring in the relationship issue. No matter how much you plan for a wedding, at the end of the day, the two people will have to live with each other. Their dreams and their
Right.
aspirations, which will have to fructify as they move along in their lives. So, before that, let me give a quick introduction to the three panelists. Dr. Lata Hemchand was right there with you. She's an MPhil in clinical psychology from NIMHANS and doctorate from Bangalore University in psychology. She's a psychotherapist in practice for over 35 years. She's secretary and CEO of Richmond Fellowship Society, an NGO that looks after people with severe mental illness. And her basic philosophy in therapy or in life is all humans need tender, loving care. I don't think any one of us would agree with all. We totally agree with her. And I told her, if you have something excess, just pass on this side. Divya Kannan completed a doctoral training at the University of Memphis and a postdoctoral training at Vanderbilt University, USA. She specializes in post-traumatic stress. In 2003, she completed that doctorate. She moved back to Bangalore, India 3 years ago, and currently works with healthcare platform PureFit as a clinical director for therapy. The next team member who formed the quartet with us is Pallavi Tomar. She's a clinical psychologist based in Bangalore, completed her MPhil from Manipal Mahi University. She's been working in the space of mental health for over 10 years. She works with adults in a private practice, and a lot of her work involves around relationship and companionship. My dear friends, I'm sure you'll all agree you cannot ask for a hand-picked team. I will very modestly confess I picked the team. Now, let me begin with a brief introduction to the program. We talk about marriages are being made in heaven. Are they in these days? Are they made in Facebook? Are they made in party circuits? Somewhere in the morning, someone was reading aloud in the newspaper. Some celebrity or celebrity to be says, I'd love to marry this guy because he's so cute in the um, program where they bash each other and then try to see who will push somebody down and come up on top. He's so cute, I wish I would marry him. What is that that makes people decide who they want to marry? Is marriage a competition between the two people? Is it winning or losing in any relationship? Or is it a corporate war between the two parties? Is marriage seen as an acquisition? Is somebody trying to acquire the other party? Or is it a merger with wonderful ideas? What about live-in relationship these days? Is live-in relationship a better option than marriage? Are they most comfortable in living and not actually tie the knot? But marriage should be based on, in my opinion, four basic pillars. The four pillars of marriage. One is of mutual trust. If there is no trust between the two people, whatever relationship it is, and it is not going to flourish. Especially so in a relationship as everlasting as it meant to be in a marital relationship. The second pillar is respect. You must be willing to give respect, and if you give respect, then I'm assuming the respect will come back to you. It is not a question of I give you 70%, you give me 30%. It's not a barter, it's not a negotiation. It's a question of do you genuinely respect your partner? Are you giving equal partnership value space to each other? And are you giving space to one another? Every relationship, after a certain time, if you are so closely entwined with each other, can result in some kind of disturbance. So, are we willing to give the other person space, some space to breathe? I think these are four critical components of a marriage or a relationship. Having set the tone for this, let's go on to the discussion with our panelists. We are going to look at it from what are premarital issues, what are the marital issues, and what are the ingredients of healthy relationship. After about 40-45 minutes, we would love to have questions coming from the audience, and the panelists will be able to and willing to answer. Let me start with our senior member here, Dr. Lata. What do you think about sometimes people get married with relatively less exposure, no exposure at all to the partners? Sometimes people know each other so well, they have practically been in a relationship, so to speak, for a few years or few months. This lack of exposure, overexposure prior to marriage, how does it impact relationship? Dr. Lata?
Yes. Thank you for the question. So, in our culture, I think generally there is a lot of pomp and show. We all know about the big fat Indian wedding. So, there is so much effort put into the ceremony of the wedding, but very little effort towards preparing the couple to face these milestones in their lives. It is a big milestone, and I think the couple who is getting married hardly have the skill, the life skills that are required, and good exposure to healthy sexuality. None of that is really done. So when they get into a marriage, and we're coming from very traditional families, a lot of girls find it extremely difficult uh, to adjust to all the demands that are there. I think both boy and girl go through this because they've never thought of it before. Beyond that big fat wedding, they have not thought about marriage in a serious way. So they start off on a very shaky footing. So the foundations itself is a little shaky because they are not, they're ill equipped to meet the demands that are there, getting along with people at home, handling responsibility. Everything comes together. And it's like you have thrown them into a deep end of the pool when they hardly know how to swim. And I'm sure a lot of people go through anxiety. There's an aversion to the whole, why did I get married kind of a feeling. And often we do get patients who are, showing anxiety symptoms. So this is one aspect of it where there is lack of exposure. So the the reason for getting together in marriage seems to be more of family pressure, or even uh, the attraction, physical attraction, or the um, matching of horoscopes and so on. So these seem to be the reasons why people get together rather than getting to understand each other and then get married. Even in love marriages, this happens, that they don't think beyond that. So I think this needs to be kept in mind when we are looking at underexposure. The other extreme is people who have been there and done that and painted the town red and have had multiple relationships. So there is this extreme as well. And what happens in this other overexposure? So the people who have this kind of an experience often try to evaluate the present experience or the present relationship in comparison with the earlier one. So it always falls short of something that they were having in their minds, and there is recrimination, there is bitter feelings, and it doesn't match up to what they wanted. So just to give you an example, there is this couple who got married after 6 years of courtship. They fell in love and they were having this courtship, but both of them had a previous relationship. So the lady in the partnership was having an abusive relationship earlier, and the man went into several sexual encounters, more of a fling, having a party, and then at the end of the party, you have a sexual encounter. So that was his pattern. So what's happening now is both of them do respect each other, love each other. Everything else is fine except their sexual life. So why? Because the lady comes from the point of view that it could become abusive, that he could hurt me. And the man comes from the point of view that, this is not exciting enough. I wanted some fun and the fun is not happening. So this is just to give you a very small example. So both underexposure and overexposure seem to cause issues right at the uh, premarital stage.
Thank you, Lata, for this exploration of exposure to marriage, pre and prior to marriage, under and over. Now, Divya, how would you think that understanding how a personal or family history or insecurities might impact a marriage? Do you think it has a role? Does it impact a marriage? If so, in what direction?
Yeah, just first wanted to say hello to everyone who's watching this, and congratulations to those of you that are going to get married soon. It's an exciting and nerve-wracking time. To answer your question a little bit, I think family is typically the first interaction a child has, right? And so the experiences you have during this time are really critical and important. And I think there is a good deal of research to tell us both on the positive and on the negative side as to how it can impact relationships in your adult years, and especially marriage and even romantic relationships. We know that if you have grown up in a more positive, loving, nurturing family environment, if you have, experienced being taken care of, if you feel like you've had effective parenting, for example, you're actually more likely to be able to advocate for what you want in a relationship or what you don't want in a partner. And on the other side, a lot of us have tough experiences that we grow up with, right? Whether it's facing a loss or financial stress in family or trauma, whatever it might be. And I think there are both silver linings in that, and there are also aspects to look out for in terms of how does it affect you as a person in terms of how you communicate, how you receive and give love and care, right? And how you even resolve conflict or disagreements. So I think it's important to reflect on that. And I think, as Dr. Lata was saying, to really, one of the steps to understanding someone else is to also understand yourself. and to understand your own history and how that would impact things. So,
Thank you, Divya. Pallavi, do you think people who come up or have experienced insecurities in their lives, and when they enter into marriage, if they have not resolved those insecurities, they're carrying that baggage with them? And it may be either or it may be both. So, do you think it has a negative impact, or how do we address this issue?
So I'm going to actually take from the example that Dr. Lata shared, right? There were two individuals with very, very different experiences prior to actually getting married, and how those two histories actually played out. The lady had her own insecurities about something turning abusive, and the man probably didn't understand where she was coming from. And this had to do with their histories, right? The insecurities, the traumas, like Divya suggested, one may experience early on in life. And I think this takes us back to that aspect of attachment that we very often talk about in therapy as well, right? The way a person attaches or relates to another individual in a relationship. And the seeds of any adult relationship, right, that we experience are actually sown very, very early on in life. My own experience of who I am as an individual starts with my relationship with a primary caregiver. It's that early. Do I feel valued, right? Do I feel secure? Do I feel safe? And what have my experiences been of the relationships I've observed around me? If I've constantly felt that relationships are very volatile, very unstable, very fragile, I might sort of incorporate those anxieties and sort of worry about this happening later. I'm going to take an example. It's rather an analogy. It's like watching a trailer of a movie, and these early experiences are somewhat like that. When we watch a trailer, we have certain expectations of what that movie is like. So if I've seen a trailer and I've felt that, okay, this is going to be a thriller, I walk into the theater expecting a thriller. So every time there's a scene, I'm like, yes, this was happening in that trailer. So we are sort of, at the critical point. It's going to turn from here on. And this is what happens in our early experiences as well. We sort of build certain expectations of what we are going to probably see later on in life as well, which is where those insecurities play a role.
Thank you very much, Pallavi. And I think all of you have mentioned about marriage and relationship. I just want to extend this to any two relationship in anybody's lives. All of these issues play a part. Their insecurities, your upbringing, your attachment, your negative experience, your unpleasant experiences, all of them play up whenever you face another insecurity there. And you sort of, as we use in our psychological terminology, you regress to that level of being insecure, how you have had difficulties in early life, and that plays out later. All right. Well, I want you to continue about how important it is to understanding or being aware of your own patterns of intimate relationship. How does your own understanding of, because people think what intimate relationship is about their own personal experience, personal knowledge, or peer information, or Mr. Google, Miss Google information. So how does it play out in a real life situation?
So actually, a lot of my work is with young adults, right? So when I see them for therapy, and they're going through that age where companionship, relationships, actually a very very primary focus. And when we see that, we see that even in individual work, really a lot is about understanding oneself. And I think the first aspect of really building a healthy relationship is awareness of who I am, what kind of an individual am I looking for? What are my patterns? What is the equation that I bring to a certain relationship, which becomes very, very important, right? So it's developing that insight or awareness into really who I am, what my expectations are. So just to share an example, let's say I've had certain experiences, or I have, had certain emotional wounds, which have probably made me very, very acutely aware of the fragility of a relationship. And then when I'm in a romantic relationship, for example, if my partner says, you know what, I would today like to actually go out with my friends instead of spending time with you. And that might actually trigger up something of, am I being rejected? Is my partner preferring someone else over me? And these are certain aspects. Again, I'm talking about awareness, just to understand that, certain feelings and emotions that may come up are for our own, sort of to be owned as well, to be understood better. And when I walk into such a situation with awareness, what I can do and tell my partner is that, oh, I feel really bad about it, but I understand that this is also important. And with that awareness, it actually becomes easier to tide over that emotion and really work towards a healthy relationship. Another example, just to sort of add to that, let's say somebody has not really been, taught, like Dr. Lata was talking about, we're not really equipping young individuals with skills. They've not really been taught on how to express emotions, how to share emotions. And they feel very uncomfortable with that kind of a vulnerability. So when they're in an intimate relationship, they don't want to go that sort of deep into their emotions. They sort of stay away. There's that distance they keep because they're trying to preserve that sense of self and not become too vulnerable and feel very, very fragile. So I think there are many ways in which this plays out. But the first rule of thumb, I think, is to develop an awareness of yourself as an individual, how your history has impacted you, what are the patterns that you may actually bring to a certain relationship.
Thank you, Pallavi, for that wonderful explanation there. Now we come to a very important member in a marital um, domain, the mother. Mother plays a very important role in every marriage, in every family. Mothers are caring, mothers are loving, mothers take a central stage in marriage, in the planning, in the preparation. But do they heave a sigh of relief and say, aha, it is done. I'm going to sit back and relax and put my feet up? I'm afraid not. Because sometimes loving, caring mothers, can they interfere in a marriage? Lata, I would like to talk about how loving, caring mothers can interfere in a woman's marriage. And Divya will say how it might interfere if a mother is too attached to the son in a marital relation. So Lata will talk about the mother and the daughter, and Divya will later come on after that with mother and son. As we all know, the poor fathers are left behind, sit in the backyard, have a glass of beer and enjoy its life. Lata.
I think both the boy and the girl, when they get married, the most difficult task, probably a painful task, is to shift their emotional anchor from the parental home to the marital unit. And this is painful, no doubt. You need to cut your umbilical cord. And that seems to be rather difficult, especially in a society like ours, where I think, especially for girls, they are encouraged to be dependent. They are never encouraged to go out and face things on their own. So it's always they are not allowed to go out alone sometimes. Always there is somebody chaperoning them. So even when they get married, they need that support constantly. So it happens more often with girls and their mothers. So I have noticed that there'll be phone calls from the mother at least twice a day about what the girl did. Did she cook? What did the parents-in-law say? How did they react? How did the husband react? And so on and so forth. So these two phone calls, morning and evening, have to be there. Otherwise, both of them, mother as well as the daughter, feel extremely insecure, or they're missing something in life. Or the daughter may feel, I can't go on unless I tell my mother this. She must approve of it. So often, what the husbands say, on the other hand, is whenever she has these long calls with her mother, we always have an argument. So you see how it's playing out, right? The over dependency on the mother may make her own conclusions and come up with her own values, which she has applied in her life, which no longer hold good for the daughter. But that awareness and that maturity may not be there always, and this starts interfering into the couple. So I think that's one of the major impediments, I would say, for for the couple to develop a relationship of their own and go forward. Yeah. Divya, you want to
Yeah,
carry on with
yeah,
it?
sure. It's interesting, Dr. Lata, you use the word umbilical cord, and I was just thinking that I think sometimes from the parent side and the mother's side as well, that cord needs to be cut when we're talking about mother and son. You see, like today, I think even as much as there are a lot of traditional relationships, I think overall relationships, especially in urban areas, are moving into a slightly more modern framework, right? And what it means sometimes now to marry into a family. I think, of course, generation to generation, that's different. I remember reading something on, I think it was a report by Shadi.com that said that, 64% of couples now prefer to live as a nuclear unit, right? Not as a joint. Yeah.
Just to come in, there are viewers who are saying that there is some sort of disturbance. So I would request when the speaker is speaking, they can unmute themselves, but the others can keep themselves on mute because there is some disturbance that's
Sure.
happening. Thank you.
Sure. Yeah. So I think what's difficult for mothers is a feeling of sometimes being threatened that okay, the status quo now might be shifting, and someone who has presumably won the affection of their son's heart, right, is coming in, and what if they change it up a lot? And I think as a defensive reaction, sometimes control might be used as a strategy to kind of keep things as they were, And, unfortunately, I think, especially culturally for us, we're very good at using guilt as a way of driving behavior, right? And I think, doing these kinds of things look like game playing and really put the couple in an impossible situation of having to choose, especially the son, right? Between either two sets of values or, we want to live our life one way, but our parents want us to live life another way. So I would say, ideally we should be giving the couple space and time to figure out a system and then kind of see where the bridge can be between, taking in the new and preserving some of the old as well.
Thank you very much, Divya. You rightly said the husband sometimes is caught between the devil and the deep sea. And he has got to please his mother who says, don't you know I have looked after you for 28 years? And your father left me and I was a young widow, but I just made sure that you have given everything. And now you are running behind the tweet who have just come 6 months ago. Now you, as she said, the guilt card is playing, and this poor guy does not know whether he's to see this side or that side. And when you try to do, you fall between the two stools and you get banging from both. The point here is the maturity of not only the man, the woman to let go is very critical if they would want the marriage to flourish at some level. We move on to the next session, marital, entering marriage with a stereotypical cultural and gender roles. Sometimes marriage is seen as a convenient arrangement. Marriage is seen as a convenient arrangement between the two families, and these two index people are placed in the center. Now, Lata, would you like to say something about is marriage a convenient event for two families and in Indian culture? And how do you see this? I unmute it first.
Yes, to a large extent, I think. Though things are changing nowadays, I mean, I think more and more couples are choosing for themselves. But I think traditionally we are a society where, we look at horoscopes, we look at status, we look at, incomes and jobs and so on, instead of really seeing whether the two people who are involved are really uh, matching in terms of their aspirations or expectations. So I think marriage as an institution is embedded in a culture. I mean, we cannot take it away. I think marriage is one of the parts of the culture. So the roles and responsibilities of the spouses are often defined by this culture. So, for example, I mean, in some traditional families, the woman is the lady, the bride who comes in is not even supposed to take off her pallu from her head. She's not supposed to meet the eyes of the elders in the house, and she should not raise her voice, and so on. So that can be one, and there can be the similar kind of culture, a different kind of culture for a boy who has to actually go and live with the parents-in-law, the uh, his wife's parents, and usually the maternal uncle happens to be the decider about the finances, about how major decisions are taken, and so on. So you can see that to a large extent. Like I said, it is changing now, but even then, we do see people who are embedded in these systems. So at such point of time, I think it's very difficult for uh, both the couple as such, to make their own unit. To start their own unit becomes extremely difficult, trying to sort of distance themselves from the families. So, just to give you an example, there is this couple. The husband is well employed in one of the investment banks, and the lady is a doctor. She's specialized in dermatology and doing very well. Both of them have a great career, and it was an arranged marriage. And what the lady finds is, she's been seeing me, and what she finds is the husband has really not cut his umbilical cord, because of which all the decisions in the house, whether what kind of house, because they live together, they wanted to buy a bigger house now that they're planning for family. uh, so whatever the house, the finances, what needs to be cooked in the house, and so on, all the decisions are taken by the mother, I mean the husband's mother. And the husband is perfectly okay with it, though otherwise they live a very cosmopolitan life outside with their friends. They have a very different kind of a lifestyle, but when it comes to home, the husband is very clear. Even to have a child, I think he needed his mother's approval. So this is the kind of situation we are in. People who are educated, who can think for themselves, who are independent otherwise, seem to be different. So the culture has a very gripping effect, I think, on the couple. And how the couple can build their own, what I call a marriage bubble, where they can protect themselves from all these influences. I think that's a big challenge.
For this insight. Pallavi, I'm sure you have had a few patients who have come with this kind of a problem situations where each of them is trying to tell you how correct they are from their perspective. So is there a middle path you would recommend and say how they should stop comparing or competing with one another, but how are they looking at the issue that should be resolved? So would you like to give your insight into this?
I think that's a very, very important question because it then becomes about me versus you, right? Where are we headed? Do we have a joint sort of an understanding of what is the expectation from this relationship? Which is where I think the aspect of mutuality comes, right? Which is understanding that each of the two individuals have needs and both those sets of needs are important. And the real part of this is moving from just functioning as a couple to really being a team together. And when a team works together, they have a joint goal, but they're also actually encouraging each other as independent players, which is what needs to be looked at. Which is where also these gender stereotypical aspects may play in. That we think our family expects us to function as a certain unit. Our extended family thinks will have certain expectations from us, and there can be concerns, as even as simple as saying, okay, so my wife has longer working hours, or let's say she's earning a lot more. What will people say about this? Without really taking a moment to really ask themselves, what is it that we want our relationship to be like? What works best for us two together? And I think that is what is very, very important, really coming to a certain middle ground and working through that.
You just mentioned very quickly they take a joint role. I think it's equally important to take a joint responsibility. With the joint responsibility comes the fact that you are willing to take the consequences of the decision that we make jointly. Otherwise, it is tu tu me, I believe that's what they say in Hindi. And is it you or is it me kind of a stuff. So everything goes well, it is me, and everything does not go well, it is you who made the decision. I think it's very clear in a relationship, decisions are made, a joint decision, joint responsibility, the clear understanding that right or wrong, we will go along together with a very healthy attitude. And that I think is a good sign for a good relationship. Now, Divya, what do you mean? What do you understand by the role of being a spouse? I mean, what is being a spouse? What does spouse mean? And what's the realistic idea of being a spouse, both from both the genders' perspective? What would you say?
I think when you hear about relationship, whether it's pre-marriage or post, there's a lot of kind of this rainbow head in the clouds sort of description of it a lot of the time, and I'm just talking about my friends and things. And I think most of us grow up from a young age, kind of hearing or being told about the perfect partner that's out there for you. I mean, media, anytime you turn on any show, it's right there in front of you. So I think when these expectations are kind of bombarded at you, it's really tough, and you kind of come to believe that there is this perfect person out there who will have no flaws and all of that. So I think a lot of people do get a rude shock at some point if they are in that head in the clouds experience a lot of the time, right? And I think what it's things like my partner should understand me all the time, or should know what I'm thinking, or I must be treated like a king or queen always. These kinds of things that we're told. Or you should never have to work at a relationship or a marriage. If you do, then something's wrong, right? So I think I think the danger of having exceedingly high positive expectations is that you will be continuously disappointed, right? And that leads to other problems like anxiety, depression, and things like that. But I think being prepared, I think is one of the panelists was talking about earlier, in terms of what is more realistic. And what's realistic is that there will be highs and lows, and there will be ups and downs, right? May not necessarily even have to do with the relationship itself. It may be other just life challenges that are going to come up for all of us at various points of time. And so being able to navigate that, right, and having kind of maybe what we would call life skills to deal with that, right, as a team, as Pallavi was also talking about, is critical. So I think we have to do a mental check-in with ourselves to understand, is my head in the clouds too much? Is there a balance, right, between what a relationship really involves and what I see in the movies and what I wanted to involve?
Thank you, Divya, with that kind of a prescription. I'm sure we move on and ask Lata. We talk about people with their egos, big egos. I don't know whether anyone has got a small, tiny, peanut-sized ego. I don't know about that. Ego clashes, communication gaps that can lead to holding on to power and being in control. As I mentioned earlier, is marriage a question of acquisition or a merger? Who is in control of the marriage? Am I holding all the reins? Is that necessary in a relationship, especially one like marriage? And how does one understand this? And how does one move around and go into a healthy space? Dr. Lata.
I think what Divya spoke was a good preamble to what I am going to say. So, so the relationship, it passes through several stages. Sometimes the relationship may roar, sometimes it may remain still, or sometimes it may meander like the river. So it goes through different phases. And though the couple, when they actually enter the marriage, come maybe with a goodwill and all positivity, but as the responsibilities and the roles keep changing, and these initial feelings of positivity get turned on to something different, and maybe there is disagreement, there is resentment about a particular aspect, or there could be hostility also, and there could be expressions of anger, and sometimes overt anger, sometimes passive aggressive. There can be exchanges like, I have given him permission to have 2 drinks in the whole week. So it's like, you have the control, you have the power to tell the husband how many drinks can he have. Or the husband might say, I let her go out with her friends. She has her own lunches with her friends. So I am very open, and I encourage her to go out. So she should not call me a narrow minded person, and so on. So this game of power does keep shifting from one to another. And when conflicts are handled maturely, probably it requires a lot of uh, listening and empathy from the uh, from each spouse's side, to be able to listen to the other and not to take control, and to be open to be vulnerable in the relationship, uh, so that the other person also feels, yes, I can show my vulnerability. I think when this does not happen, then the egos become very important. So, what do we mean by egos? Egos are probably our values, our beliefs, our misconceptions, and sometimes our rigidities about how a relationship should be or should not be. And that comes in the way, and there is a tug of war. And I think it's not being highly intelligent or being very knowledgeable that helps you in this, in resolving these conflicts, but it's more your uh, attitude, attitude towards the whole relationship. Are you willing to give an equal uh, power to the other person? You know, what are your qualities, personal qualities? Are you a patient person? Are you an intolerant person? So these are things which will decide whether these ego clashes become very strong and get into a more serious mode, or is the couple able to resolve this by showing their weaknesses and being open about what they are. I think.
Yeah, thank you, Lata. Um, Pallavi, is it important? How important it is if the couple have to hold on to the resentments and staying in denial? How does it impact the relationship? Or would you recommend that, if you openly talk about it, people may, their, the spouse may misunderstand. So hold on to your fears and anxieties. Don't talk to him about it. Or is it better to talk and resolve issues? And what would you say?
I think what Divya was talking about, sort of, their head being in the clouds, or sort of having this rosy picture of what the relationship should be like. So when they're smooth sailing, when it seems like they're both in love, why talk about these real topics, right? Of, let's say, careers or sexual preferences or finances. Why rock the boat? And I've seen, actually, in my practice, there's a lot of hesitation to really, actually have open and honest conversations about one's expectations and what they would probably like in a marital relationship, with reference to these topics and probably a lot more, even family arrangements, for example. And I think there is no shortcut to this. If you don't address them and you sort of keep putting them under the carpet, they're just going to keep simmering till there's an explosion. And we do see a lot of couples who then come later for marital therapy, where a lot of these complications have built over a long period of time, have caused immense emotional hurt, wounds, feelings of resentment. So I would actually suggest that it's very important to have open and honest conversations and really take these things head on. Be clear about what is your expectation and to do it in a safe and a respectful way.
Divya, how important is listening in a relationship? Because sometimes people try to talk, but either of them may want to dominate a conversation and say, "You wait, you listen to me," but not allowing the other person. How important is listening in any relationship, especially a healthy marital relationship?
Yeah, I think it's very critical. I think what gets in the way of listening is, this kind of blaming each other, right? I think Palvi and even Dr. Lata had mentioned the example of, going out with your friends or one partner going out. And, I mean, I think all of us can probably think of a time when we accused our partner of something, right? For example, okay, you went out and you had fun with your friends and you didn't message me, right? So, but what are we really saying, right? What we're really saying is, okay, maybe I felt insecure that you didn't message me and you were having such a good time and I just wanted to hear from you to say good night, right? It has such a different flavor to it. And I'm actually owning the emotion and reaction that I'm having to an event, right? So my partner's going to be more willing to listen to me if I talk in what I think, we all call as I language, right? Starting your communication with I rather than what you did or did not do. So I think it'll be much easier to listen if we can practice that, and it's a really effective way to get our emotional needs met, right? And so if listening is one of those needs that we have, then we also maybe need to start thinking and reflecting a little bit more intentionally on how do we get that need met effectively, rather than going through the defensive, less vulnerable way of attacking it.
Thank you, Divya. Dr. Lata, I come back to you. We all know we have discussed about having marriage is not a bed of roses. And when people think of marriage, sometimes the romanticized version of marriage is tall, dark, handsome man driving a lovely colt down the road in a dusty village atmosphere. And he opens the door with a noisy and everybody looking around, comes and sits there, candle, breeze, roses. Wow, isn't that romantic? And yet we know there are conflicts. Even when a relationship begins on that note, there are conflicts. Is it possible to manage these conflicts respectfully and effectively? Few tips there.
Yeah. Yeah, I would like to start with what you said in the beginning, Dr. Kalyan Sundaram, about four pillars. For me, I always think of three pillars, but now I will add the fourth one. The three pillars that I talk about with many couples is one is respect, the trust, and empathy. So I think these three, I would say, are the ones which hold that relationship. But if I have to specifically say, I think one of the things that matters a lot is to come into the relationship with innocence. What I mean by innocence is not carrying our baggages, not carrying our stories in the immediate experience. So, whatever we experience it with a certain openness and not bring in our preconceived ideas or notions about it. So that way you interact in the present without any other things, beliefs or misconceptions which are guiding you in this process. So that's how I would, so how I would put it across is, if I'm getting into a relationship, I do not know much and I am willing to learn. If I stand still long enough in love, then I can definitely get what I'm seeking. This is how I would put it across. The other thing is guarding, like I said earlier, guarding our marriages or guarding the marital unit and the team, like Pallavi said, the team should be guarded against all outside forces. So if the team knows like what are the things that they both want, the couple knows what are the things that are important for them, and they are able to define how your family, how much will I allow the family to influence me, or even the work life balance, how much of work, because these days I think most people are workaholic, most people have that ambition, and the material things matter quite a lot. So because of which, again, the work life balance, the boundaries are blurred, and often that does not give the time the couple needs even to discuss about their dreams of future, or even the sadness they feel about some event, or their past wounds that they want to heal from. And where else can they go but in this intimate relationship where there is a scope for it? So all these things need time. So the team, the couple should decide, what are the boundaries going to be? And I think that would help a lot. And remember that we help create the other person's by what we are like what Divya was saying, exactly that. How we are is how we express ourselves, is how the other person will respond to us. So I think that needs to be kept in mind.
Thank you, Lata. Pallavi, do you think it is important to have a kind of a role distribution? Do couples need to talk about role distribution in terms of work, home, finance, or anything else? How important it is in a relationship? And will this make it no? What do you think?
I think just to clarify, I think there's no one rule apply all. But at the same time, it is very important to understand when we're working as teammates, we play on our strengths, right? How do we support the other person? And hence, yes, it's a good idea to talk about what are my strengths and what are the areas that I would like to focus on. But at the same time, be able to, maintain flexibility. What I'm really suggesting is that we shouldn't think of roles as boxes that we're trying to fit our partner into, right? We understand what the other person's strength is and what is it that we're expecting from this relationship and work towards it together.
Uh,
So,
yeah, what is it?
You're on mute, Dr. Kalyan. You're on mute.
Sorry, Pallavi, you wanted to say something more? Okay.
no, that's about
All
it.
right. All right. Now, Divya, now there are couples who become very defensive in the relationship. They tend to blame each other. You know what you were like last year when we were talking about this, when your mother visited us, you know what happened? Unwilling to learn from one another, or willingness to take a responsibility for their own irritable or irrational behavior sometimes. You can have a difference of opinion, you can have an argument, you can have a, you know, a powwow. But at the end of the day, are you willing to say, hey, look, I think I flew off the handle? Is it important to talk about this role distribution, behavior, and responsibility in order to make this relationship flourish?
Yeah, I think I touched upon that in the earlier, comment about, non I using our language and really listening. I find it really interesting to, tell some of the couples I work with to just practice not interrupting the other person for, even a minute. And we've even in meetings and stuff, it's just become now it's so hard to do. But I think, in addition to the style of communication, which I feel is really important in being able to have all those four pillars kind of work and not blame and attack each other. I think sometimes it's just, there is a practice of just letting go and practice of forgiveness as well that can come in handy here. And I always like to debrief after an argument, or when everyone's calm, and and talk about, okay, what really happened here, because how do we not what aspects of this do we not want to take forward next time? And this again, as all of us know, is what we do in therapy. And I think it's a really great gift for couples to do this, on their own as well, and work through what works and does not work for them in communication. So you're on mute.
Yeah, you're on mute.
We have sort of covered several of the issues that we wanted to cover in our panel discussion. I'm looking for any questions so far. The questions have not turned up yet in the comment box. But in the meantime, I want to say something about the differences between men and the women, the way they are wired. A couple can have an argument and it may go on into late into the night. At some point in time, the man feels he's exhausted, he's tired, he just wants to turn around. But many a time, the woman feels the issue is not resolved because the loose ends is not tied up. So she's keeping awake, wondering how can he just turn around and go to bed when he has not given me the answer I've asked him for. He doesn't see anything wrong because he goes to sleep because to him the match is over, the final ball is bowled. To her, there is a super over coming up there. Therefore, and at this point in time, this not resolved issues may pop up early morning. She's not slept, she's teary, and she wakes up with a bloated head, meaning headache and worries and tension. He's asking, what happened to you? Now, is that something you have an experience, Pallavi? I think you're smiling. I think you've seen a few people like that. How would you handle this when the couple come and say,
We can't hear you.
So your mic is
sorry,
off.
he
Your
thinks he
mic
has
is
given
off.
sufficient time? He thinks he has done everything. She says, no, you're not even scratched the surface. Where is it going?
I think a large part of this, again, I try to touch upon these few aspects, and I think a large part of this is insight and awareness of one's own self. What is the way that I deal with conflict? What am I expecting from it? What is the conclusion that I was hoping for? And being able to sort of understand what is the part that I play in this equation of the relationship, right? The second part of this is the mutuality, right? What are the needs of my partner? And what are the needs that I have come into this relationship with? And really looking at both those and seeing what was addressed and what is still left sort of unaddressed. Why is one partner feeling not heard or not accommodated in some sense? And I think the third is open and honest communication, right? To be able to talk about what has hurt an individual, what are their expectations, what is it that they'd like to work on, or what are certain patterns that they would like to avoid in the future in a safe and a respectful manner. I think if these three basics in some way or the other are followed, you're generally working towards a healthy relationship.
Thank you, Pallavi. I think from my perspective and my team's perspective here, I think we have had a very enjoyable discussion on this very, very important topic. I don't know about the audience, which we can't see them, but I know that my team has enjoyed participating and interacting. Just I'd like to wind up by asking each one of them, what is your take home message? Divya, what is your take home message for the whole scenario that you've been talking about?
Yeah, I think for me, and I think my co-panelists touched upon this as well, is, don't be afraid to be vulnerable. And what I mean by that is essentially allowing your partner to know you as fully as possible. I think that is one of the key take-home messages and one of the, only ways in which you can truly establish closeness and a real, genuine, authentic relationship with someone.
Thank you very much, Divya. Dr. Lata, what is your take home message in this whole scenario?
Yeah, I think one of the most important things is to understand that both the partners have both the uh, distorted kind of uh, uh, conceptions as well as the good the good part of it. So all of us have that weak part and the good part, and we are all made that way. So I think being genuine and being understanding about it is important. To be tolerant towards the other part is important. And one of the definitions of love given by Scott Peck, which I'm very fond of quoting, uh, I just want to say that and stop. So he says loving a person means extending oneself for the growth of the other and of yourself. So you grow together. When you love, you grow together and you extend yourself. I feel this is a very different kind of definition, and uh, I would urge all the couples, young couples, to probably look into this.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lata. And Pallavi, what's your quick take-home message?
I think I'll take from what Dr. Lata had initially started with. Don't look at this as just a milestone or an event. This is the starting of a journey, right? And it requires you to really work on aspiring to be the best version of yourself, of really working towards building that, functioning in a good team with your partner. This requires hard work. This requires care for the relationship. So again, there aren't any sort of pre-existing aspects that one can sort of fit their partner themselves into. What worked for your parents, what worked for your friends, or what may be working for your siblings doesn't necessarily have to work for you in a marital relationship. Really start defining and understanding who are you as an individual, who your partner is, and really work together towards building a relationship together.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you. And as a moderator, I have a final word. As somebody said, marriage is a journey and one needs to keep working on it. The minute you stop working on your relationship at any point in time, you'll be surprised because when you turn the corner, there's a big boulder which you never even thought existed. So keep working on it. There must be a give and take in a relationship. And when you understand, giving is far more refreshing and rewarding than taking takes a back seat. And there must be forget and forgive kind of an issue in any relationship because no one is perfect. And don't expect the other one to be perfect when you yourself are quite often not quite there. Thank you very much for the team from Zeroin and Espousal for this opportunity for all of us. I think on behalf of all the panelists, Pallavi, Lata, and Divya, myself, we thoroughly enjoyed it and we had a great ball. And back to you, Shika.
Same here, Doctor. We have definitely enjoyed this a lot. We can see the comments going in. Thank you for the very interesting session. Great insights on self awareness and connecting with others. Very eloquent. Topmost of the fraternity under one roof. So, those are the comments that are flowing in, if you all can see. So, thank you, doctors, for this amazing session. Definitely was very interesting. And it's an honor to have you all on board at Espousal. Thank you once again.
Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you. Thank you.
Thanks.